I am not sure which is worse. The fact that more than 300 million children around the world today cannot read a single word, one single word, or the fact that many of them have been in school for up to 4 years. Getting children into schools, enrolled and attending, has been one of the greatest development achievements of our time. Yet so many of these children are simply not learning. The United Nations calls this the global learning crisis. The World Bank refers to it as learning poverty, a state in which more than half of the world's children cannot read a simple story at the end of primary school. That rate is over 80% in many poorer countries. By whatever name you call it, by whatever statistic you measure it, clearly being in school is not the answer to learning. In this talk, I'm going to talk about the role of language and literacy in this global learning crisis, some of the facets of the problem, some of the aspects that contribute to the problem, and some possible solutions as well. This global learning crisis undoubtedly stems from numerous reasons, some macro, large scale, and systemic. Some are more micro and local. But one reason that is often overlooked is the role of language. From complex multilingual communities where there are multiple mother tongues within one classroom, to dialectical differences across regions, to sometimes a smaller minority language which is not even included in the education system in any way, the manifestations of bilingualism and multilingualism in the education system are multiple. But no matter what the manifestation is, bilingual and multilingual issues in the education system has significant economic, political, and cognitive implications. And it leads to a question that education stakeholders have to grapple with, which is probably one of the biggest they have to face. In what languages to teach children in, when and why, and directly related to that, in what languages to assess the effectiveness of our learning and teaching systems. Decades of research and advocacy have confirmed that a child will not learn to read and write in a language they're not familiar with. Yet millions of children are in education systems in which they are being educated in languages they do not speak or understand. And the reasons for this are multiple, including the fact that there are multiple different languages sometimes in one classroom or in one community, and it's very difficult to pinpoint which one to use. Or the fact that there is a lot of different pushbacks for the mother tongue education. So one of the biggest, despite this evidence, there's a lot of different benefits for mother tongue education, including the fact that the child will have a sense of belonging in the classroom, a sense of confidence, and a sense of wanting to go to the room. There will also be benefits for the community and for the parents who become much more involved in the students' education, whether or not they are literate themselves. Despite this evidence, there's a lot of pushback against mother tongue education, including for reasons such as the lack of resources, the lack of trained or even sometimes untrained teachers who are fluent in this language, the lack of political will to implement an education in that particular language, and sometimes even the lack of a writing system in order to teach in that language. One of the major reasons that there is a pushback for mother tongue-based multilingual education is the palpable and intuitive link that research is confirming between higher competence in English or French or Portuguese or Spanish or whatever that post-colonial language is, and higher socioeconomic mobility and higher wages. So given the tension between the need for more mother tongue education and the higher demand and ever-increasing demand from communities for English or whatever the post-colonial language is, the question really becomes, how do we reconcile this tension? And if we look at this question not as a problem of one language versus another, rather a question of how do we get children to be biliterate learners or multilingual learners in the most cost-efficient and effective way possible. That is a better way to start thinking about this problem. We are trying to address this question in India and Ethiopia through the lens of what is called a transfer facilitation model of second language reading. This model actually looks at what resources a child brings to the classroom and how those resources transfer from one language to another. So it is very clear that a child who's a good reader in their first language will transfer those skills to the second language. But then the question becomes, for education policymakers who are trying to make a language of instruction policy, how much of that first language is required for the learner to be a strong reader in both the mother tongue and in the second language. So in India and Ethiopia, we're trying to address this exact question, and we have actually found that there is a significant tipping point of readiness, at which point the child is able to transfer their skills from their mother tongue to the second language and become better readers in both the mother tongue and in the second language. There is a dire need for more such learning science research in order to be able to solve the global learning crisis. Language and literacy remain key pieces in this puzzle of this global learning crisis. And until we learn how to unpack, how to teach linguistically diverse students in more effective ways, we won't be able to develop better programs and policy for the bilingual and multilingual communities that we are trying to educate. So the faster we can do that, the better we can create theories of change for teaching effectiveness for multilingual students, the better we can assess the effectiveness of our teaching and learning systems, and the faster we can turn around this global learning crisis. Thank you.